On today's show, the Houston Rockets hold on to get the revenge dub against the San Antonio Spurs, and Jalen Green looks like an absolute star. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, an ugly win is still a win. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. That one's new. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube, just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. And while you're there, drop us a comment. Give us your reaction to this Rockets win. They held on for the win against the San Antonio Spurs. 106-101 was the final score. Or just do a drive-by, say go Rockets. It helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. It was ugly, but it was also a win. The Rockets now 2-2 on the season after the revenge dub against the San Antonio Spurs. 106-101, holding on for dear life there at the end of regulation. This was kind of a headache of a game. The Rockets looked just night and day better in the first half of this game, and then that second half kind of crept up, just like it did against the Hornets, where the Rockets looked really good for the first two and a half quarters, and then things started to unravel a little bit. They hit an offensive drought in that third quarter. More on that a little bit later. We'll kind of unpack the game flow, what went wrong in this game, and the Spurs started their comeback kind of late in that third quarter, and then it bled into the fourth quarter. Rockets giving up a ton of offensive rebounds, ton of second chance points for San Antonio. And then the run by San Antonio was compounded by the fact that the Rockets could just not put points on the board in the second half of this game. The second half, they finished with a total of 44 points scored after dropping 62 in the first half. So the Rockets really just kind of limping to the finish line a little bit. But it crescendoed with under a minute to go, when at that point the game was a 5-point game. And then, I apologize, it wasn't even a 5-point game. It was an 8-point game with under a minute to go. Rockets have their closing lineup in there. It's the starters plus Tari, Eason, minus Alperen, Sengun. And Tari fouls Chris Paul on a 3, and then they go to review it, and they rule that it was a flagrant foul. So Chris Paul gets 2 attempts at a free throw to make 1, which is, that's what it is. He nails the free throw. The Spurs get the ball back, and then Wemby hits a jumper. The Spurs had a 6-point possession to cut it from an 8-point game with under a minute to go to just a 2-point game, a single possession with just over 30 seconds left. And then the very next play, Rockets draw it up. And look, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you should be well familiar with this play by now. The Rockets ran an action called Wiper, where they had Jalen Green at the top, ball in his hands. Fred VanVleet came up to set a screen for Jalen Green. The defense stuck on Jalen Green. They sent 2 to the ball. Jalen did a fantastic job of bringing the defense far enough away from Fred VanVleet before kicking the pass back out. Fred, wide open, top of the key, drains a huge three-pointer. Even though it wasn't Fred's night, even though he was struggling to shoot the ball a little bit in this game, drains a huge three-pointer. Steady Freddy at your service. Gives the Rockets a 5-point cushion, and they wind up coasting to the finish line. From there, they trade some free throws, all that good stuff. Look, a win is a win, and it was great to see the Rockets able to hold on just enough to execute down the stretch of this game. But we got to talk about Jalen Green, man. And we're going to get to the other parts of this game and the offensive drought in that third quarter and everything. But Jalen Green really looks like he's playing like an absolute star right now. He is. He was absolutely absurd in this game. 36 points on 11 of 22 shooting. He was 7 of 13 from downtown. 7 of 13. 7 of 7 at the charity stripe. He only had 1 rebound and 2 assists in this game. Did have 4 turnovers. So there's little things that Jalen can still clean up. But he had it going in this game. He went absolute, like, scorching hot in the second quarter. Had 5 threes in the second quarter. Was just on fire. He had 26 points at halftime. Now, the concern here is, we'd still like to see him put together a full 4 quarters of consistent play. He was held scoreless in that third quarter. So he had about a 9-minute stretch of run in the third quarter, and he didn't score a single point there. And that helped contribute to some of the Rockets' offensive struggles in that third frame. But ultimately, he showed up when it mattered in the fourth quarter. He found a way to manufacture points, even though the shot wasn't falling as consistently in the second half. He managed to get to the free throw line a ton. And I don't know how many different times we've talked about it here on the show. What's the one thing that star players are able to do when their shot isn't falling, when it's inconsistent, when your offense starts to dry up? What's the one thing you can do to manufacture points? Get to the free throw line. Jalen Green in that fourth quarter, he scored 10 points, but he only shot 2 of 9 from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3, but he was 5 of 5 at the free throw line. 5 of his 7 free throws coming in that final quarter. Just finding ways to be able to manufacture some points. And even though the final 2 points kind of came when the game was more or less over at the free throw line, it's still impressive to see him find ways to get to the charity stripe. Right? You got to, even in an ugly game like this, you got to string together offense any way you can. And guess what? Jalen Green was so dominant in this game offensively. He was just, no other Rocket cracked 20 points in this game. And there were only a handful of Rockets who broke double figures. Jalen Green, 36. Then you had Jabari, 17, Alperen at 12, and Fred at 11, right? This was a low-scoring affair across the board for the Rockets. Jalen Green, on that final offensive possession of the game, right? He made the right read, right? He trusted his teammate. He trusted Fred. All the attention was on Jalen Green. And guess what? He made the play that you expect a star player to make. Drew all the attention of the Spurs defense and then whipped the pass back to Fred VanVleet. And again, he made sure to keep the ball in his hands long enough to where the Spurs defenders wouldn't have time to rotate back and close back out on Fred VanVleet. He brought him far enough to the perimeter or towards the sideline to be able to give Fred plenty of time to hit that three-pointer and ice the game. Just an insane performance from Jalen. And he had some, again, scoring it, not just, yes, the 3-ball was falling in this game, but he was getting it done, in a variety of ways, right? He was scoring. He had a couple good drives all the way to the rim. Again, got to the free throw line in this game. And then he had, my God, I really wish. There was the moment where Jalen drove in on Wemby and snatched his ankles and dropped him to the floor. Oh, my goodness, if Jalen, and he missed the jumper, but my God, if Jalen had iced that jumper, that would have fed just generations of Rockets fans. I needed that. Still posted the highlight because it was still a filthy move, but he'll get Wemby next time. This was, without a doubt, through 4 games, Jalen Green has absolutely been the best player for the Houston Rockets, and it really looks like he's arrived, right? It really looks like he's here. It looks like he's ready to be a star. And shout out to former Houston Rockets assistant coach John Lucas, who was on the record a couple years back, or a while back. It might have been right before the season last year or at the very end of the season before, while it was still the Silas era, who basically went on record as to say, look, when Jalen Green hits year 4, he's going to have a leap like Ja Morant, like Devin Booker. He was like, give him till year 4. John Lucas knows ball, and here we are, and Jalen Green looks like a bona fide star through a few games. Hopefully he can keep it up as the season progresses, but this is such an important development for the Houston Rockets that Jalen Green looks this good through 4 games. Coming up, I want to talk about some of the other game flow from this one, the concerning offensive output or lack thereof in the third quarter for the Houston Rockets, why Dillon Brooks feels like the sneaky MVP from this game, a strong bounce back for Jabari Smith Jr., Steven Adams making his Houston Rockets debut. So much more to get to. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different ticketing offers. But that's not the only feature that they have that's incredible. They've got their Game Time ticket covers, their lowest price guarantee, views from your seat, so you know exactly what to expect. But my personal favorite is their all-in pricing feature. So you download the Game Time app, you toggle on the all-in pricing feature, and they are fully transparent from start to finish with how much you're going to pay for your tickets. I don't know about you, but when I'm buying tickets, I hate it when you get to the very, very end and then they hit you with like the digital handling fee and the service charge and the convenience fee, and you wind up paying more in fees than you do for your actual tickets. It sucks. That doesn't happen with Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Okay, so this was an ugly game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Rockets have yet to put together a full 48-minute basketball game. Now, this was a wire-to-wire victory, so that was nice, right? The Spurs literally never led in this game. The closest they got was off that 6-point play generated by Chris Paul, the flagrant foul, Wemby's two-pointer, whatever. They got real close to tying things back up. Never could quite get over the hump. So credit to the Rockets for being able to hold on and get the stops that they needed and get the buckets that they needed late to be able to win this game. But still a little bit of a concerning trend, right? Like, this is a Rockets team that has playoff aspirations, and through 4 games, we haven't seen them play a good 4 quarters. That trend cannot continue. And in particular in this game, look, Rockets got off to an absolutely fantastic start, right? First 2 quarters, incredible. Opening quarter, 29-15 advantage, 14-point lead. Rockets looked night and day different from last game. Last game, they gave up 38 points in the first quarter to the Spurs. They were giving up straight line drives to the basket like every other possession, or even back-to-back possessions in that first quarter. So they locked in defensively. They looked a ton better in the first half of this game. And then something is happening where, like, they're just unable, for whatever reason, to sustain that level of intensity, energy, whatever it is, over the course of 4 quarters. Now, early in this game, the Rockets did get into it a little bit. Obviously, so Jeremy Sochan, and this, I didn't mention this on the show. I should have when recapping the first meeting between these two teams, but Jeremy Sochan had an interview that he conducted right before the first Rockets Spurs game, where he basically, was being pressed, asked questions about Houston, and then at the very end of the interview, he goes, F Houston. Like, very verbally, just F Houston. And so, there was some chippiness, and Dillon Brooks got into it with Wemby a little bit last game. And then in this game in particular, very early on, like 5 minutes to go in the first quarter or something, Jabari Smith Jr., Jeremy Sochan get tangled up under the basket. Sochan, being the instigator that he is, like, hooks Jabari's arm and tries to, drag him around. And Jabari's having none of it, so he shoves him off. Double technicals, offsetting. But that chippiness, I think, helped set the tone for the Rockets early, where they were very much playing with a chip on their shoulder. They were playing and seeking revenge for losing against the Spurs in the previous matchup. And they held that edge for most of the game. And then it was that third quarter where the energy started to wane a little bit, and the Spurs just fought harder. And in particular, they were absolutely crushing the Rockets on the offensive glass. It was absolutely unreal, the number of offensive rebounds that the Rockets wound up giving up in that third quarter. Taking a look really quickly, offensive rebounds, third quarter, the Rockets gave up 10 offensive rebounds in the third quarter alone. That is an absurd amount. More than half of the Spurs' offensive rebounds for the entire game came in that third quarter. Now, there was one possession in there that the Spurs got like 3 or maybe it was 4 offensive rebounds on one possession, and they failed to capitalize at all. The Rockets just kept giving them rebound after rebound after rebound, and they kept putting up miss after miss after miss. And then finally, Tari Eason came in, secured the rebound, went the other way. drove the length of the court and like dished kind of this like awkward behind the head pass to Steven Adams, who made his Rockets debut and was able to lay it in for 2. Now, to make matters worse, the Rockets offense also kind of dried up there in that third quarter. The Spurs threw out a zone defense that the Rockets just, for the life of them, could not figure it out. I mean, they put up like, it was something like 6 points in almost 6 minutes through the third quarter. Like, it looked really bad there for a stretch of the third quarter. They could just not figure out this Spurs zone with Wemby kind of lurking and roaming, and they weren't getting up. They weren't busting the zone. They weren't getting it to the middle of the floor and collapsing the zone and then kicking it out to shooters. But even if they were kicking it out to shooters, I mean, they were 1 of 4 in the quarter. They didn't get up a lot of threes to begin with in that third quarter. But then as the quarter progressed, they were able to finally, like once Wemby got checked out of the game and they didn't have that lurking rim deterring presence in there, they were able to finally get some stuff going. But it was that the Spurs had all the momentum going from the third quarter into the fourth quarter. And look, ultimately, that just can't happen. The Rockets just cannot have these games where they have a strong first half and then completely collapse in the second half, or they start off bad and have a bad first half and then wake up in the second half. They need to put together a full 4 quarters of good basketball, and it'll be really exciting once we see the team actually do that and put that product on the floor. Elsewhere in this game, I want to say that Dillon Brooks was like, obviously Jalen Green is the MVP. I'm not going to like say Dillon Brooks deserves it over Jalen or player of the game or whatever. But Dillon Brooks was really important in this game. I feel like he did a great job setting the tone, and defensively, he did about as good as you can hope to do on Victor Wembanyama, especially after Wemby kind of embarrassed the Rockets the other night. I really felt like Dillon, both on when he was guarding Wemby or even when Wemby was out of the game and Dillon was able to guard some of the Spurs perimeter players, his ball pressure, his tenacity, he was very much setting the tone defensively throughout this game for the Houston Rockets. Not his best offensive showing, right? Only 7 points, 2 of 9 shooting, but he had 7 rebounds in there. And again, I think that his defensive impact and presence in this game is exactly what you want out of your quote unquote enforcer, right? That's exactly what Dillon did. He was locked in, and I want to give a lot of credit to Jabari Smith Jr., who had a really strong bounce back performance in this game. 17 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3. He had 8 rebounds in there, had an assist, got to the free throw line 6 times, hit 5 of them, was the Rockets' second leading scorer in this game. That is a huge bounce back from where he was just 1 game ago. And again, it very much feels like Jabari's kind of like a swing factor for this Rockets team, right? When they get Jabari playing like this, when he's able to, hit some shots, and he had a couple early shots in this game, right? He had the 3-pointer to literally the very first basket of the game for the Rockets, and then follow that up with a quick 2. Like for Jabari, when he's very much a rhythm guy, and I feel like when he gets involved early, when he gets a couple early looks and can knock those down, it really helps unlock his game for the rest of the 4 quarters. Not sure if that's something that the Rockets can do or afford to do every single game, but it looks really good when it happens. An important part of this game and how the Rockets were able to get so far ahead, their most efficient offensive quarter in this game came from Steven Adams being a big part of that second unit in that second quarter. Steven Adams, the crushing screens that he was setting, literally the very first play of the game, Steven Adams checks in, sets a just bone-crushing screen for Jaylen Green, and it's just like the seas just part and it's wide open, and Jaylen Green had a straight line drive to the rim and is able to just elevate and dunk it home. Absolutely beautiful. Steven Adams' impact in this game was huge. He was a plus 11. He led the Rockets, a team high plus 11 in his 14 minutes played. He gives them a dimension that they don't have, that nobody else on the roster provides. Jock Landale can give some serviceable backup 5 minutes, but Jock Landale is not a Steven Adams, right? They're in completely different stratospheres as far as what they provide to the team. And seeing the Rockets being able to mix it up, right, with different lineups where they've got Sengun in their starting lineup, they can go to Steven Adams and get jumbo-sized, extra big at the 5 spot, or they can go small, which they did for stretches of this game where they run Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5 to have that ultimate switchability 1 through 5. There's a lot of different lineups, a lot of different variations of this team that Ime Udoka can throw out there. And to see Steven Adams get his debut, to make his impact felt in this game, had 6 points, had a few rebounds, we got to start tracking screen assists here at Locked On Rockets, because Steven Adams set so many different screens that freed up his teammates. He's got a little bit of a late start, right? Missed the first 3 games of the season, but so he'll have some catching up to do on the screen assists when it comes to other guys like Rudy Gobert and whatnot, who are always way up at the top of the league in screen assists. But man, was his impact needed in this game, and it was absolutely felt in this game. Coming up, want to get to final thoughts from this one. Reed Sheppard, his role being reduced in the Houston Rockets rotation. Alperen Sengun, little better, still not the LP that we know and love. And final thoughts from this one. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Some interesting, I think, takeaways from the rotations in these past couple games for Ime Udoka, and focusing on this game in particular. Reed Sheppard played just 3 minutes in this game. Played 3 minutes in the first half, didn't see any burn in the second half, and his minutes totals have decreased with each and every game so far this season. Now, this could just be a matchup thing. It could just be the Spurs, their length, their size, the size of their backcourt guys. Maybe it was just not the night for Reed Sheppard and Ime wanted to go elsewhere. This could be a trend where we see Reed Sheppard. Maybe Ime is just weaning him off the minutes because he's not sure if he's ready right now to compete at this level. We'll see what happens next game against the Dallas Mavericks, and we'll see kind of whether Reed gets his regular spot in the rotation back or whatnot. As it stands right now, it very much feels like Reed is being, at least in this game, Ime went away from Reed Sheppard and only used him for those 3 minutes or whatever, and basically has to alternate and stagger the minutes between Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet, which is unfortunately exactly where the team was last year. Now, the good news is Jalen Green looks absolutely ready for the role this year, right? Jalen Green in the non-Fred VanVleet minutes is doing a great job, still attacking, still orchestrating the Rockets offense, shouldering that offensive burden, right? And Fred, despite his shooting woes in this game, 11 points, 4 of 14 shooting, still had 9 assists, right? And still defending at a good level, still doing all the things that you expect Fred VanVleet to do. So ultimately, it's unfortunate, and we'll see what happens with Reed's development. We'll see if Ime decides that he, needs a little bit of time to get up to speed. Maybe they start slow playing the development. Who knows? But I find it interesting because Ime is very much also still he's still figuring out his rotations at this point. He's not dead set on any one type of rotation, and obviously he only just now got Steven Adams back in the mix, and Adams projects to be a really big part of what the Houston Rockets are likely to do this season. So maybe that's why Reed Sheppard's minutes were weaned off or squeezed in this game, because he had access to Steven Adams for the first time. But I find it interesting that we've had back-to-back games now where there have been different closing 5-man lineups. Last game, Cam Whitmore was the guy who got the closing nod in the first meetup against the Spurs. In this game, it was Tari Eason who got the closing nod in the closing lineup. So Ime is going to I think he's still trying to figure out who his best 5 is at the end of games, because right now it's conventional wisdom would point you to say it's probably the starters minus Alperen Sengun in certain matchups like this one. More on that in just a second, because this was not a favorable matchup for Alperen Sengun. So starters minus Sengun, and then you add one of Amin Thompson or Tari Eason. But the minutes where Amin Thompson were out there felt really clunky in this game. He didn't feel nearly as effective as he has in the past. Look, he did knock down a 3. He knocked down a little midi jumper, but he also looked kind of indecisive and unsure of himself at times when he was driving to the basket. And some of that can just be, off night, whatever. Some of it can be Amin still needs to work on his touch around the rim. But the 3 turnovers out of Amin kind of being a little out of control at times. You could see that Ime was trying to test something out with a different player in there. Tari Eason, in his minutes, was incredibly productive. 6 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, blowing up a lot of actions, doing a great job kind of handling some of the switches onto Victor Wembanyama situationally throughout the game when Dillon Brooks got switched off of Wemby. So all in all, Tari deserved to close in this game. And I aside from his careless foul on Chris Paul there at the end that gift wrapped the Spurs 6 straight points, overall a good performance from Tari Eason. It was good to see Ime kind of trust him to be in the closing lineup. And we'll see. I mean, I don't think that Ime's really settled on who his best 5 is to close out a game. And there's going to be nights where Sengun is absolutely in the closing 5. But this was not one of them. And I guess we're going to wrap up on this, talking about Alperen Sengun, because I think there are some very valid concerns about his play through 4 games so far this season. He hasn't looked great since really that first half against the Hornets, where he looked just absolutely dominant. And then ever since then, so for like 3.5 straight games, it hasn't been great for Sengun. Now, we did point out last episode that he's nursing what looks like maybe a back injury, right? He's constantly had the wrap around his waist, and maybe there's something going on there. We don't know yet. There's nothing on record to tell us that Sengun is dealing with some pain, achiness, discomfort, whatever. But I'm not going to make excuses for him, right? You just got paid a 5-year near max contract, and you were the Rockets' best player last season. He needs to be better. Now, the good news is I have every confidence in the world that he will be better. I don't think this is like I don't think he like tricked the Rockets out of all this money and now he's just going to be like a scrub. That's not who he is. That's not the competitor that he is. It's just a rough stretch of games, not the best showing from him. And even in this game, he was much better than he was last outing against the Spurs, right? In this game, 12 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, had a steal, had a block in there, 5 of 14 shooting. He knocked down a 3. And he had a possession where Wemby tried to isolate on him. Like, Wemby called for the clear out on Alperen Sengun, and Alp like bunched up his shorts and he was like, nah, I got this. And he clamped Wemby. He forced Wemby into like a ridiculous like contested fadeaway from 18 feet. Like, so Sengun is not, it's not, I don't think it should be a crazy overreaction to this early stretch. He's struggling, but I also think that he's earned a little bit of benefit of the doubt for Rockets fans based on his entire play all of last season, right? Like, give him a little bit of time. Let's see. Maybe we find out that he is nursing some kind of an injury, which is why he hasn't looked like himself, because he's not playing with anywhere near the confidence that he had last year, right? Last year, Sengun was playing like he was like, oh, I'm the guy, right? I'm him. And this year, it doesn't feel like that's the case so far. Some of it's probably just matchup dependent, right? Wemby is another year older. He's another year smarter. He's had a whole offseason to learn and go back and look at film and everything. So, and again, based on how Sengun embarrassed Wemby the last time, well, I guess last season when these two guys met up and Sengun dropped his career high on him, I'm sure that Wemby wanted to come out and make sure that he didn't let that happen again. And there were definitely moments where you could tell, like, Wemby was lurking, trying to make sure that he could be that weak side presence to stop Sengun. And some of it, again, I'm not going to overreact to two games here against the Spurs. Let's see what it looks like, after another, 5-game sample size. Let's see where Sengun looks, how he looks after 10 games, 15 games, 20 games, whatever. And we can revisit the discussion and see if there's legitimately any cause for concern, any level of regression or whatever. I feel like he's going to bounce back. Not that worried about it. And again, he's been very vocal saying that he didn't play his best game, that he has much bigger expectations for himself. And I don't even think you can look at this game and say that he had a bad game. Like, this is just, I think the issue is relative to our expectations for Alperen Sengun. It's a mediocre performance or a subpar performance based on where we think he should be at, right? Like, last year he averaged 21, 9, and 5. So when he puts up anything less than 21, 9, and 5, we're like, oh, he had a bad night, right? It wasn't necessarily Sengun having a bad night. It was just, okay, Jalen had the Spurs number. He had it going, so the Rockets rode the hot hand. That was basically it. Could there still have been some opportunities where the Rockets probably could have capitalized more on Sengun, or could he have been a little bit more decisive at times with some of his moves and some of the things that he was trying to do? Like, there was a moment early, at one point in the second half where they got Fred and Sengun got a switch, and Stephon Castle was behind Sengun, and Wemby was switched out onto Fred, and then Sengun passed out of it and tried to repost, and they were able to scram switch and get back. And so then Wemby was back on Sengun, and it was like, man, like it's little moments like that, right? Not capitalizing on, you have the small on you, just take advantage of him while he's there, right? Rather than letting Wemby reestablish his post position, and then you got to deal with the freaking 7'4" guy behind you, right? The guy who's eventually going to be on the all-time shot blockers list. So, a lot to improve on for Sengun for sure, but I think that they'll be able to look at film of this. They'll be able to figure out different ways that he needs to be able to attack, and ultimately just get his confidence back, right? Sengun, when he's playing at his, at the level that we know he can play at, he's always had a little bit of like a swagger to him, a confidence to him, the ability to get whatever he wants against whoever he's playing against, and that hasn't been there through these first few games. So hopefully he's able to find that, rediscover that, because once the Rockets get Sengun playing at the level that we know he's capable of playing at, and then if you got Jalen Green playing the way that he's playing right now, then this team is going to be incredibly tough to deal with. Quick aside here, there was a point where Jeremy Sohan was hitting everything in this game, and I was just like beside myself. I was begging for literally anybody to put a body on Sohan and try to keep him off the glass, just stopping him from getting whatever he wanted at the rim. He finished the game 22 points, team high for the Spurs, 9 of 19 shooting overall. He had 5 offensive rebounds in this game. Overall, look, an ugly win, but a win is still a win. Rockets are now even at 2-2. They dropped a couple early gimmies. Not the end of the world. They'll have to make it up somewhere else. And their very next game, they've got the Dallas Mavericks Thursday night in Dallas. So that's not exactly going to be an easy game. That'll be a spooky game, if you will, on Halloween. But with that, I want to know your thoughts from this game. Give me your takeaways. Give me your feelings from this game. What did you like? What didn't you like? Let me know all your thoughts in those YouTube comments. Remember, the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on whatever podcast platform you desire. Like and subscribe on YouTube and drop us a comment while you're there. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.